Alright guys, I want to do a video on the age of the Earth. Now this is going to be pretty brief. I'm going to skip over a lot of details. I'm just going to give you high level, but I have linked to the web pages where I got the information. So I want to talk about the age of the Earth, millions of years. What does the evidence tell us? So I want to look at empirical scientific evidence. What does it show us if you just look at it plainly without any preconceived notions? What does it just tell us if you just look at it? So I'm going to be looking at creation.com, and they have this article here, Can Science Prove the Age of the Earth? From a biblical perspective, we will take a look at a number of areas that add to the overwhelming body of scientific evidence that the Earth is in fact young, and there's a lot of it that most evolutionists, well, all evolutionists, ignore basically, or write off. And in the spirit of the advancement of science and truth, it's not valid to completely disregard what is very overwhelming evidence. And we're going to look at the definition of empirical. So let's look at that now. So this is from Live Science website. I think it's livescience.com. Empirical evidence, a definition. Empirical evidence is the information that is acquired by observation or experimentation. This data is recorded and analyzed by scientists and is a central process as a part of the scientific method. The scientific method begins with scientists forming questions and then acquiring the knowledge to either support or disprove a specific theory. That is where the collection of empirical data comes into play. Before any pieces of empirical data is collected, scientists carefully design their research methods to ensure the accuracy, quality, and integrity of the data. If there are flaws in the way that the empirical data is collected, the research will not be considered valid. Now there's a pile of room for bias, worldviews, and all that sort of thing to come into play here. But by definition, empirical evidence, and everybody would agree with this, is information that is acquired by observation or experimentation. Alright, so it needs to be observable, it needs to be repeatable. That's key. What does empirical evidence show us? We'll look at a number of scientific categories. Creation.com has a large number of items from each category, where the categories include biological evidence, geological evidence, radiometric dating, astronomical, and even human history evidences. Now you may suggest that something like human history evidence isn't valid, but I think if you put it together with the body of evidence from science, it actually agrees with the body of evidence from science as well, so that's interesting. So we need to remember what it means. It means evidence or data acquired by observation or experimentation. So biological evidence. Now, again, I took this from the creation.com website. There are about 20 or 30 articles per section here, per category. I just picked one from each category just as an example. This one's called The Bugs and Brine. Another ancient DNA find, much harder to refute, should logically be a death knell of millions of years. Many scientists have reported finding DNA in fossils that are said to be millions of years old. We have commented on some of these and their implications for the widespread erroneous belief in an old Earth. Some scientists have also reported reviving bacteria from the gut of a bee, supposedly 15 to 40 million years old. And more recently, researchers have claimed to have received bacteria from rocks said to be 250 million years old. Because the chemistry of DNA tells us that it could not last millions of years, even under ideal storage conditions, the claims of finding ancient DNA, let alone ancient intact bacteria, have been disputed. One expert, Svante Pabo, found that a few hours after death, DNA breaks up into chains 100 to 200 units long, that water alone would completely break down break it down within 50,000 years. Um, and this is giving the evolutionists the benefit of the doubt for a long age. And that background radiation alone would eventually erase the DNA information, even in the absence of water and oxygen. Skeptics attribute the reported DNA finds to contamination of samples. So there's scientists finding apparently intact DNA in bees that's millions of years old, and it doesn't line up with other scientific facts that DNA does not withstand millions and millions of years. So right away they're ignoring evidence that other associates in their area of expertise has already proven that it cannot be. So that's one item. Geological evidence. Estimating the ocean's age. This is one that I like. It has to do with the amount of salt. Basically, the story is the ocean is getting saltier. In the past, it was less salty, and at the rate of at the rate it's acquiring salt, you can go step back in time and figure out when it had no salt. So just read quickly. Granting the most generous assumptions to evolutionists, Austin and Humphreys calculated that the ocean must be less than 62 million years old. It's important to stress that this is not an actual age, but a maximum age. This assumes that evolutionists are right, that the Earth is millions of years old, but it's not old enough for the theory of evolution. The Earth has to be billions of years old, and the ocean's even older. Oceans have to be older than 62 million, certainly. That is, this evidence is consistent with any age up to 62 million years, including the biblical age of 6,000. So what it means is, without any catastrophic event, the oceans are very young, and if you start considering catastrophic events, non-uniformitarianism, which the Bible says happened, and basically the Earth tells us happened as well, that there was catastrophes. If you consider catastrophe, it could easily be 6,000 years, and so that's what this article goes on to say. The salinity of the oceans is a strong evidence that they and the Earth itself are far younger than billions of years. That's a for sure fact, far younger than billions of years, that are required for evolution, and it's consistent with the biblical age of 6,000 years. It is also far younger than evolutionist dates for many marine creatures. In short, the sea is not salty enough to suit the taste of evolutionists. Of course, all calculations depend on assumptions about the past, like starting conditions and constant rates of processes, like a constant rate of salt going into the ocean being washed off the land. They can never prove the age of something, but the basic gist of it is that while we can't prove it, the evidence shows us that the Earth is not billions of years old. So that's a great one. Diamond's a creationist's best friend. Carbon. Some try to measure the age by how much C14 has decayed. Many people think radiocarbon dating proves billions of years, but evolutionists know that it can't, because C14 decays too fast. Its half-life is only 5,700 years. That is, every 5,700 years, half of it decays away. Another 2 half-lives, a quarter is left. In fact, a lump of C14 as massive as the Earth would have all decayed in less than 1 million years. So if the Earth is 1 billion years old, there should be no C14 to measure, and they use C14 to measure a lot of stuff. Now, you could get into the arguments, well, what about all the other dating methods? And this website, as well as others, refute and give reasons to disbelieve the assumptions related to all the other dating methods, and some are similar and some are different. If samples were really over 1 million years old, there would be no radiocarbon left. But this is not what we find, even with very sensitive C14 detectors. And I do have the links down below there. The moon receding from the Earth. So the moon is moving away from the Earth at 4 centimeters per year. So if you step back in time, if the moon is moving away from the Earth at 4 centimeters, if you step back in time, you can measure how long it is before the moon touches the Earth. So I'll just read it quickly. Friction by tides is slowing the Earth's rotation. The law of conservation of angular momentum says that the angular momentum of the Earth must be gained by the Moon. Thus, the Moon is slowly receding from the Earth at about 4 centimeters per year. And that rate would be greater in the past. The Moon could never have been closer than 11,000 miles. This is known as the Roche limit, because the Earth's tidal forces would have shattered the Earth. If the Earth was closer than 11,000 miles, the tides would wash over the whole continent because of the gravitational forces. So it couldn't be that closer. But even if the Moon had started receding from being in contact with the Earth, it would have taken only 1.37 billion years to reach its present distance. So we know it couldn't even start touching the Earth, but even if it did, it would be 1.37 billion years. This is the maximum possible age, far too young again for evolutionists, because they're looking at several billion years. So this is another evidence that's pretty obvious that tells you that no, the Earth is younger than the evolutionists say. And this is even giving them the benefit of the doubt that the Earth is millions of years old, or even 1 billion years old, and that doesn't even match with evolution, according to how they teach it. Human history dating. So this relates to the population of the Earth. Evolutionists claim that mankind evolved from apes about 1 million years ago. If the population had grown at just 0.01% per year, doubling only every 7,000 years, there could be 10 to the 43rd people today. That's a number with 43 zeros after it. This number is so big that not even Texans have a word for it. To try to put a number in context, say every individual is given standing room only of about 1 square meter per person. However, the land surface area of the whole Earth is only 1.5 times 10 to the 14 square meters. If every one of those square meters were made into a world just like this one, all these worlds put together would still only have a surface area of 10 to the 28 people in this way. It would fit 10 to the 28 people in this way. This is only a tiny fraction of the 10 to the 43rd. Those who adhere to evolutionary story argue that disease, famine, and war kept the numbers almost constant for most of this period, which means that mankind was on the brink of extinction for most of supposed history. This stretches credulity to its limits. So they're making up something. They're not looking at they're not even looking at uniformitarianism as it relates to the rate of growth. They're not even following their own doctrine about the history of the Earth by suggesting that well, no, it's not the same as it is now. It didn't grow as fast 4,000 years ago. Well, that doesn't even make sense. Evolution is based on uniformitarianism, where everything stays the same. So if everything stayed the same, then wouldn't the growth rate stay the same? Even giving disease and stuff like that, it doesn't make any sense. What does make sense is 6 billion human beings since the flood of Noah. And if you do the math and the current rate of the population, you would expect from the flood of Noah about 4,000 years ago about 6 billion people on the Earth. So what does empirical evidence tell us? The empirical evidence tells us that at minimum the age of the Earth definitely is not as old as evolutionists suggest. It requires evolution, required for evolution to actually work. So it's far younger than their theory suggests. The evidence actually suggests much younger dates if you take the evolutionary worldview and its skew out of the picture. If you take out that biased worldview and the presuppositions presented by it, you see an Earth which is much younger, and the data tells us so. The conclusion: the Bible is accurate where it touches on all those categories. Not only does the evidence support a younger Earth, it basically shouts it out. It's obvious when you look at the data. It's telling us in every area that it's younger. Please do read the full articles. I linked that below each of the clippings I got there. Read the full articles. There's a ton of detail there. There's a lot of other sources for this information as well. This is just plain stuff. This is plain looking at the evidence, and it backs up the Bible. You don't have to be biased to see that. It just does. So you can rely on the Bible. The Bible is true, and the Bible is God's Word.